Hi everyone, this is Ernie Svensson, and welcome to today's session on how to use Adobe Reader in your daily law practice. So this is the beginning presentation for discussing how to get involved in using PDFs in your daily law practice, and it begins with using the free Adobe Reader program. So let me go ahead and share my screen so that you all can see what I am going to be talking about today. And that's the opening slide. Those of you who don't know me, here's my background. But what we're going to be talking about today is PDFs. Now, everybody's encountered PDFs at this point. We're all familiar with them. We are able to view them using a tool like the free Adobe Reader program, or sometimes we're even able to open PDFs up inside of our browser. So Internet Explorer, Safari, and Google Chrome and various other browsers now will allow you to open a PDF inside the browser and read it there. So, looking at PDFs is pretty common. We know how to do this. Some of us even know what PDFs stand for, which is Portable Document Format. I refer to PDFs as digital paper because, to me, once you start down the path of becoming a paperless lawyer, which means shedding paper as much as you can, you're going to have to replace that paper with something. And the something that you're going to replace it with is a PDF document. So the key to becoming more adept in the digital world, to becoming more adept as a modern lawyer, is learning how to do more with PDFs than simply opening them up and looking at them. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we're primarily going to be talking today about using the free Adobe Reader program. So when you ask people, and lawyers especially, do you have a copy of Adobe Acrobat, which is the program that costs money, this program here, they will say, oh yes, I have a copy of Acrobat. But in fact, what they actually have is a copy of Adobe Reader. So Adobe Reader is free. Adobe Acrobat costs either $300 or $400, depending on if you're using the standard version or the professional version. There's not a lot of difference between the two, but basically the main difference is that with the professional version you can Bates stamp documents or Bates number them, and you can also redact and take out sensitive parts of a PDF using the redaction feature in Adobe Acrobat Professional. Both of them will allow you to run text recognition on the PDF and make them searchable. But so that's the main thing that they both do. If you're interested in Adobe Acrobat, we'll talk more about this later, but I have a book out called Adobe Acrobat 1 Hour for Lawyers, and that's the book that you would basically want. So what we're going to be talking about today are basic skills. Now, some of these basic skills are basic skills that I think lawyers should have, which they can only do with Acrobat, things like inserting pages into a PDF or rearranging pages. If you want to do that, you need the full version of Acrobat, not just the Reader. But many of these basic skills you can do in Adobe Reader. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to Adobe Reader, and this is the book that I created, or at least this is the first edition of it. It'll maybe change a little bit, and it's called Adobe Reader 11 for Lawyers. And the reason why I wrote this book is because while many lawyers understand that Acrobat may be useful, they're afraid to buy it. They don't want to spend $300 or $400, and so they just kind of stick to Adobe Reader, and they never really get very far. Or some lawyers actually have Adobe Acrobat, but don't really even know how to do the things with it that they could do if they just had Reader. So Reader is pretty basic, and you should know how to do everything useful with Adobe Reader because the program's free, so why not? So this book here is going to walk you through everything you need to know about how to use Adobe Reader. Now you'll notice over here on the left there's a side panel, and this is called the Bookmarks panel. Let's see, it's labeled Bookmarks. So in this Bookmarks panel there are a bunch of different bookmarks, which are basically hyperlinks, so that if I click on one of these hyperlinks, it will take me to that page. I can flip back easily, and I'm using a keyboard shortcut to do this. But this PDF, when you open it up, will open up with the bookmarks panel displayed. You can make this disappear if you want to by clicking on the bookmarks icon, or you can make it reappear by clicking again. So this is basically an overview. It's sort of the table of contents, really, of this book. And so I can drag out the bookmarks panel to make it easier for me to read these. And I can see, basically what the book is about. There's different sections in the book: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. These are the basic sections, and then there's an appendix section. So we're not going to cover everything in here, but we are going to cover some of the key things. Now, the first thing, there's an introduction section, which I'll let you guys read if you have a copy of the book, which will talk to you about why should lawyers care about PDFs and so forth. And also to be able to click on the help menu to see which version you have. So if you go up to, I'm using the Mac version. In Windows, it's pretty much the same. You click on Adobe Reader, and you're going to see which version you have. You have version 11 something, depending on how updated it is. And so, this is just the introduction section. You guys can flip through that and take a look at that. The first thing, though, is the interface. Now, when you're dealing with any software program, and Adobe Reader is no exception, you kind of want to spend a little time in the beginning when you first get it set up to make sure that you have things set up the way that you want to work on them, the way that they're optimal, say, for lawyers, and so forth. So a lot of people say, well, I don't do that because I don't really know what's useful for me. So what I tried to do was walk you through and explain to you, first of all, what are the 4 sections, what are the menus and toolbars, what do the views look like, and then we start talking about settings and preferences. So basically the 4 main sections of Adobe Reader are, as you might imagine, the panel across the top, which is where the menus and toolbars are. Then there's the navigation pane, which is where this bookmarks panel is. There's a couple of other different things. There's a page thumbnail view where you can see all of the different pages if you want to do that. And then there's also an attachments area. So you can click in there and see if there are any attachments, which there are not to this PDF. But if there were, they would show up there. We'll talk about attachments later. So that's the navigation pane. Then there, in the center area, is the document pane. So this is where the document is that you're working on. And then if you want to open up the task pane, you click on these 3, one of these 3 menus up here, either the tools menu or the sign menu, which is for digital signatures, or the comments menu. So these, and if you click on comments menu again or any of them twice, they will go away. So those are the 4 areas that are displayed, and then you have slightly different views depending on if you're a Mac or PC, but they look basically the same. So that's pretty much the interface in general. Now the thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set up your preferences. So the way you set up your preferences is you go on Adobe Reader with the Mac. You would go to the Adobe Reader menu and then drop down to Preferences. On a PC, you would go to the Edit menu and select Preferences from there. But once you select Preferences, you're going to get a panel that looks like this that pops up, and then there are a bunch of different categories. And you kind of go through the categories and decide which thing you want to work on. So I'm going to cancel that for a second and say, so in the book we talk about this. This is the category preferences, and I put checkboxes next to the ones that I think you should change. And I told you what I think you should change it to. So I think you should change the most recent documents used list from 9 to 10, because why not have as many as possible? I think you might want to change it to automatically save changes to the file to something less than 5 minutes, so maybe 1 or 2 minutes. The main thing, though, is under the general category. So under the general category here, there's this choice of use single key accelerators to access tools. You want to enable that, and I will explain why in a second, but trust me, you want to click that. That's not on by default, so you want to make that come on. And then you can do these other things here. But that's basically the preferences that you want to take care of. Having done that, you also want to to fix the toolbars. So I'm going to reset my toolbar to default. So by default, your toolbar when you first install Adobe Reader would look like this toolbar here. So there's some icons for various things, for printing, for saving, for going up one page, down one page. If you enter a page number in here, you can jump to that page number, and you enter the number and hit return. You can zoom in or out on a document. You can choose your level of zoom and so forth. So these are all the ones that are installed by default. If you right-click on this an area that's not doesn't already have an icon. I mean, sometimes you can do it between two of them, but it's easier if you just go to a nice big clean area and you right-click. You get to choose some additional things that you would want to add. Now, I think that you're always going to want to add the previous view button, because I'll show you why in a second, but let's click on this. Now you'll see that I add it and it just pops up over here. Now if I right click and choose page navigation, see it doesn't have a checkbox to show me which things have already been installed. I just kind of have to install them and see if they show up and where they show up. If I added the next view, it's going to go to just to the right. So you don't get to decide where these icons get placed. They just get placed there. So to show you why the previous view button is useful, let's say that I go to page 33 in this PDF. So I put 33, hit enter. Now it's jumped to page 33, but I want to get back to where I was, and I forgot. What was the number of that page again? I don't know. I hit previous view, and it jumps back to that page number. So having the previous view button is really useful. I don't know about the next view so much, but basically, if you add those two, it's kind of like the buttons on the browser that you're used to using, and why not use that? I would also memorize the keyboard shortcut, and it's on my list of keyboard shortcuts, which we'll talk about at the end, but there's just some things that you're going to want to be able to do without having to even bother to go up here to click. But I always install it as a default just because I want to be able to see it too, and sometimes you happen to be up there and you can just click on it if you don't feel like using the keyboard shortcut. So that's something that you would want to add. So that's setting the toolbars. The next thing is viewing PDFs. So under the view menu, you have a lot of options. You can rotate, you can go to different pages, you can go page by page, zoom. We're going to talk about all of these in a second. So viewing PDFs is what most people are used to doing, but they probably aren't even really good at using those different options, or don't take the time to study to see what they do. So the one that's most obvious that many people encounter is you get a PDF and it's been misrotated and there's a page that's sideways. It shouldn't be sideways. So you want to read it and you can't read it without tilting your head. So the rotation command lets you do is take a PDF like this, and you would say view, rotate view, and you would say go let's say counterclockwise. So we've taken that page here and messed it up. So I'm going to go back and say clockwise. And I think actually, I think if you hit previous view button, it'll fix it for you. So that's another way to fix it. But if you have it misrotated, that's what you have to do. Now the thing about Adobe Reader is that you can't just rotate one page. So if I rotate that page and make it go that way, every other page in the PDF is going to be like that. So this is one difference between Reader and and Acrobat, is that with Acrobat you can rotate just one page if it's out of whack, and then save that view from there on out. Now you can't do that with Reader. With Reader you can just temporarily flip it, but it flips the whole PDF. So if just one page is off, it's not really going to help you with Reader so much because you can't save it, but at least you can read it. So the next thing that's important is the single page view, and these two icons up here. So one of them, these are page display icons. So let's just close this out for a second. So this one, if I click on it, is going to make it as wide as possible, and it's also going to scroll between pages. See that? So that's great if I wanted to select some text and copy it across 2 pages. That's what that would be useful for, or if I just like this view, which is sort of like reading in a browser. But if I want the page to snap into view and have the top at the top, and then the bottom, and then when I go from page to page, it just jumps from page to page, then I would use that button up there. So that's what these 2 buttons do, and they're very important because those are actually 2 icons for which there's really no good shortcut to jump between those 2. So you basically are going to have to remember that they're up there and click on them to make things work. You can make things snap into view in a certain sense, but you can't. You have to go between scrolling and not scrolling. This is the fastest way to do it. The other option is there are different kinds of zooming. There's marquee zoom and dynamic zoom. And marquee zoom is where you drag over the area you want to zoom into, and it will pop up to that view. The other option is the dynamic zoom, and that's where you click and click, and let's see here. Oops. This is where you you click in, you zoom in, or zoom out. Now I'm using the keyboard shortcut because it's just faster, and it's basically, on a Mac it would be Command, on a Windows machine it would be Control. So you command a Mac and control a PC. So that modifier key, either combined with the plus symbol, zooms in, or the minus symbol, each time you hit it, zooms out. So being able to snap it to view, zoom in, zoom out, rotate when you need to, those are pretty basic things. Now the loop tool, we can read about that. I'm not going to talk about that one. The zoom and page display options. This is back to kind of the difference between these 2 things, where you can enable scrolling or make it single page view. You can do that from the view menu if you want to. There are these other options where you can have 2 pages show up at one time, but that's really not something people tend to do that much. So those are basically the options. There's also full screen mode, where if you want to have the PDF take over the full screen, and if I hit Control L, then you get nothing but black background and the PDF itself. So but you can't get to the bookmarks panel, you'll notice. So it's useful for reading mostly. So I'm going to hit Escape and get out of that mode. And let's talk about navigating PDFs. So one way to navigate from page to page is what we already talked about. If you go up into this little panel area up here and you type in, let's say, number 2 for page 2 and hit enter, it's going to jump to page 2. But you're going to probably be doing this a lot. You're probably going to be navigating around with PDFs and so forth. So what you want to do is learn the keyboard shortcut. So the keyboard shortcut for this is Command or Control and then the Shift key together, and then the letter N for number. So when you do that, you get this little dialog box that pops up saying page whatever, and you type in the page, type 2, hit enter, and you're there. So that's faster than going up there to that area and typing in the number and then clicking and enter. So I would recommend you learn to use that shortcut and just get good at that. You can also use these buttons up here to go from page to page, or if you add the page up, the first page, last page, which you would do from page navigation, you'd add the first page, and you'd add the last page, and now those get added to the toolbar. So you can use those things to navigate around. You can go from previous to next, like we talked about, and so forth. So that's pretty basic. The other basic thing is you can use the scroll bar to navigate, and I don't know how many of you know this, but if you click in any area below where the scroll is, it will jump to that area. Another thing that's useful to know is that if you're scrolling like that, if you hit the space bar, it'll go down, screen by screen or page by page. If you hit shift in the space bar, it'll go back upwards. So that's pretty basic stuff. Then you can also use the bookmarks like we talked about, because that's how I've been navigating around. So if I want to jump to a new page, I can click on the bookmark and it will take me there. And you can also see if we have any attachments. We already talked about that. So let's talk now, and this is where we're starting to get past some of the basic stuff, and we're getting into some more sophisticated things. Now, these things I'm going to show you now are things that only in the latest version of Adobe Reader got added. So these are things that you used to only be able to do in Adobe Acrobat. So you used to have to pay money for that. But now you can do them just using Adobe Reader as long as you have version 11. So these are all things that involve the comments tools, which are located up here. And the things that you can do are you can highlight text, right? And you can draw boxes around things and so forth. So let's talk about the highlighting. So the highlighting is you would select the highlighter tool. It's up here by default, so all you'd have to do is click on it. And you'll also notice that it's telling you, if you look at the pop-up, it says highlight text, and then in parentheses it says U. The U means that's a keyboard shortcut. And remember earlier when we enabled the single key accelerator? So that means that I would be able to go from U to S to add a sticky note, U, S, and so forth. So if I hit the keyboard U and then drag across, it's going to do highlighting. If I hit S and click somewhere, it's going to give me a sticky note. And let me get rid of those two things here just so you can go back and start talking about it. So the highlighter is really useful, as you can see, because I hit U. If I want to highlight this section, I've highlighted it, and it's also creating a comment list over here. So if I highlight again, it creates another comment. If I go down to page, let's see, 22, and highlight this, it's going to highlight that in yellow as well. So you could go through any document, if you're reading a case, if you're reading a case report, whatever it is, and you can highlight it. Now the thing is, these highlights up here are kind of like bookmarks. So if I click on this one, or that one, it's going to take me to that page. And I can delete the highlighting by right-clicking and hitting delete. So in one fell swoop, let me go back here, I can bop through this document and create these highlights, then find the places where they are very quickly by clicking on them. So highlighting, very useful. Then the sticky note, which is this tool up here, is useful if you don't want to highlight something so much as add some commentary, and you want the commentary to be pinned to a certain place in the PDF. And you can write yourself notes and tell yourself, what it's all about. So those are sticky notes, and you'll notice that if I switch over to you and highlight here, there's a little icon that will tell you what type of comment it is. That's a sticky note. That's highlighting. Now with the highlighting, I can, if I double click on it, it'll pop up a sticky note, and then I can add my own comments just like a sticky note. So you can add commentary to highlighting if you want to. So really the only time you would want to use a sticky note if it's not something you highlighted, but you just want to drop in some kind of commentary. And it's the kind of thing you would do if you were writing in the margins of a case. Whatever you'd write in the margin, that's what the sticky note or comment would be to highlighting. So I'm going to delete these two comments, and that's basically the highlighter tool. So we talk the shortcuts in here. You can also change the comment properties, and I'm not going to talk about that so much here, but the reason why you might want to do that is if you right-click on this, you have the option to look at the properties of the comment, and when you select that, it's going to pop up with a little dialog box, and you can set these up and then make those properties the default. So you could change the color to any version of green or red or whatever you want. That's one thing you can do in the properties, so it doesn't have to be yellow highlighting. You can change the name of the author. So up here where it says Ernest Svensson all in one Word, if I wanted it to be like this, I could also change the subject, and I could call this, let's say, damages. So I could highlight things and then tag them with either liability, damages, or some sub-issue in the case. And then you can print out these comments if you have Acrobat and so forth. So comments can be really helpful. Basically, you just kind of want to go through here, read about these, how to select the highlighter tool, the sticky notes. There's these other kinds of things called the call-out text box, where you can create a text box that points at something. You can underline areas in a PDF, and you can also create proofreading notes so that people know, that if you're working with somebody and saying, well, add something here, take this out. All of those things are these tools here in the bottom row under annotations. Those are things that you would use to do proofreading. And as I already showed you how to delete comments. You can delete one at a time, or you can delete a whole batch of them by clicking at the top and then going down to the bottom. Stamps are useful as well. Now this is the stamp tool is under annotations all the way here to the right, and basically if you click on that, it'll give you a whole palette of different things. You can click on the Show Stamps palette, and it will pop this thing up, and you can say, show me the different stamps that it has that are dynamic, show me the sign here stamps, and so forth. Or you can go looking for them individually. But you can even add a signature and put your signature someplace and use a signature stamp, so that instead of having to sign a PDF physically on paper, but printing it out, signing it, then scanning it back in, you could just have a signature stamp, which is basically an image of your signature, and that's the image of my signature. And there's a way to get these things in here that's a little trickier when you're using Adobe Reader, but you can put it in there, drag it around, make it bigger, smaller, delete it if you want to. So signature stamps are useful. That's the main stamp I think that I use the most, I think most lawyers would use, but there are those stamps that let you say draft, or you can look at them up here. There's standard business stamps, like they'll say approved, not approved, draft, confidential, things like that. So there's all kinds of different stamps. Those are kind of fun, kind of useful. The basic message I would say is, if you have an iPad, then signing things on an iPad is easier, first of all, because it's easier to create a signature by drawing on the surface of the iPad than it is to try to draw on some tablet-like device that's connected to a computer. So that's the easiest way to get a signature in. Digital signatures are what this panel over here is all about, where it says sign. So this is another way that you can sign. But what Adobe's trying to get you to do here is to use their EchoSign service, which is fine, except that you're only going to get 5 signatures for free, and then you're going to have to pay them, and I think they charge at least $14 a month, so most lawyers tend not to opt for that. But if you have a practice where you need people signing things a lot, then EchoSign is definitely worthwhile, because it eliminates the problem of saying, well, let's bring the thing over to your place, or let's all get together. You can just circulate it, and it keeps track of who signed, and then shoots out an email to everybody with the final signed version when it's done. So it's very effective. I think a lot of real estate lawyers are starting to use this now. But all of that happens under this sign menu up here, and that's what digital signatures are all about. Now, examining PDFs is something that's worth doing once in a while, because you're going to get documents from people. For me, it's typically government agencies or court reporters. And so this is the document properties area. So you would choose Command or Control D is the shortcut. And from in here, there's a couple of tabs across the top. Only the first 2 really matter. The description tab will tell you the title of the PDF, the author, some other basic metadata. It'll tell you the number of pages in the PDF, which you can already tell by looking up there. But it will tell you the file size of the PDF. So this PDF is 6.12 megabytes. That's sometimes useful to know because before you send a PDF to somebody by email, you kind of need to know, is it the kind of document that might be too big for me to email because it wouldn't go through the email system being too big. So then you have to figure out a different way of sending it. So that's basically what's useful under the description tab. Under the security tab, you want to see what's allowed. So on this PDF, I'm allowed to print it, I'm allowed to copy, I'm allowed to comment, fill form fields, sign, and so forth. I'm not allowed to extract pages, which would mean take one or two pages out of the PDF and create a new PDF. And I'm not allowed to do whatever document assembly is. And basically both of those things, the reason they're not allowed is because I don't have Adobe Acrobat. Adobe Reader won't let me do those things, so it's saying I can't do them. But if I opened this PDF in Adobe Acrobat, you wouldn't see these restrictions. So the PDF itself has no restrictions. The only restrictions you're seeing here are because we're using Adobe Reader. But sometimes when you get a PDF from a court reporter and you're using Adobe Acrobat, you'll find that these page extraction or document assembly aren't allowed, and then you'll just have to figure out a way to get around that, which is advanced stuff. And I'm not going to talk about that today. So the most important thing, I would say, for lawyers to know how to do with Adobe Reader is to be able to find information. And basically that just means using the find command, which is under edit, which actually doesn't make any sense because you're not really editing. But anyway, so find, the shortcut is Control or Command F. You should memorize that. When you trigger the find command, it opens up a blue box in the top right of the document pane, and then you can type in your search. And so I could say PDF. There's going to be a lot of the places where in this document it says PDF. So I can search in the text of the document itself, but I also have some additional options. So if I click on this down arrow, I can tell Adobe Reader that I only want to search for whole words. I want to search in case sensitive mode. I want to search for bookmarks, which is useful if you have a document that has a huge number of bookmarks. Or I can also search in the comments. Now that's the find command. Okay, then there's another thing which Adobe calls, so they call it find or advanced search. So if I go up here to the edit menu, there's two commands. There's find, and really it should say advanced find because it was find, but then they're saying advanced search. Now they change the name, which is something that Adobe does that's kind of annoying. But basically, you select Control or Command F, but you add the Shift key, and if you use that shortcut, Command Control Shift, you get this panel over here, which basically has the same choices you just saw, except a couple of different ones in addition to those. So it'll say over here you're only going to search in the current document, but with the advanced search command you can search in other PDFs, one or many, by pointing it at a folder or pointing in a certain area. So you can say, I want you to search all these PDFs and look for these words or phrases. And again, you can do search on whole words, case sensitive, bookmarks, or comments. And wait, there's more. If you go down here to the bottom and say show more options and click on this button, now you would expect to see a lot of new options, but what we're going to see is when we click, basically the only options we get, well, we get this thing called stemming and proximity, which we don't care about that, but it lets us include the attachments. So in this document we don't have any attachments, but in this document we do have attachments. So what I'm going to do is demonstrate the search function inside this document. So I'm going to hit show more options. We're going to search the attachments. And one of these documents in here has Drew Brees' name. So I'm going to hit Brees, enter, and then it's telling me there's an attached document called Long Boring Contract, and apparently Drew Brees' name pops in. So this document here, which is just mumbo jumbo of 6 pages of mumbo jumbo fake Latin called Lorem Ipsum, somewhere in this mumbo jumbo is Drew Brees' name, and it's actually right here. And it's probably somewhere else too, because I think I put it in twice. So this is a good thing to test people on, to see if they can find things like this, because otherwise, if you had to read this document, or if I created a mumbo jumbo document with, say, 200 pages or 300 pages, and the word Drew Brees appeared in there only once, the only way for you to search and find it would be to use the find or advanced search feature. And if it was a PDF that had an attachment, or a bunch of attachments, you'd want to be able to search all of them to find this. Then you have to use the advanced find function, and you have to know to click on the show more options and make sure it includes the attachments. So that is pretty much the basic thing that folks need to know. Let's see something here. It's not happy now. Let's see something. Adobe Reader not responding. All right, hang on a second. I don't lose any changes, that's fine. Hold on. All right, Adobe Reader book. Okay, this opened up in Acrobat. That's right. So this is the book that you guys probably have. If not, it's the book you should get. So the last thing that I want to talk to you about is, I mentioned that keyboard shortcuts are important, and that you should memorize these. So at the very end, on page 61, there's a single page which I recommend that you print out and keep this document next to your computer at all times, because it's basically a summary of all the things we covered today. So it talks about how do you find text, how do you create sticky notes and hit comments, how do you bookmark, except you can't do that except if you have Acrobat, rotating pages, jump to prior view, and so forth. And these are the single key accelerators. This is on the last page. And these are also worth knowing. So U would be how you would highlight text. V would be how you quickly select text if you want to copy it, and so forth. So those are two useful things to have and print out. And that basically covers Adobe Reader, the basics of how to work with PDFs in the practice of law. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Just email me at ernie@paperlesschase.com, and I'm sure I would be able to give you the answer or quickly find it for you if you needed me to. So I'm happy to answer questions anytime. I love talking about PDFs and how lawyers can use them to be more effective in their practice, because that's the main thing that's helped me, is that once I decided I wanted to become paperless, then you need to replace that skill of working very easily with paper with a new skill, which means working very easily with PDFs. So I think it's really important for lawyers to learn this stuff. That's why I've written those two books, and I hope that that helps you guys get started. So thank you all very much.